Hello everyone and welcome to Algebra 1. We are going to start off the year by talking about some of the nuts and bolts about Algebra 1. Specifically, we're talking about variables and expressions. So let's talk about what an expression is versus an equation, because both of those things do show up in Algebra 1. We're going to contrast those here in this table. An expression, if you want to think about it in terms of the English language, they're similar to like sentence fragments, so not a complete sentence. Maybe saying someone with hair, walking on the beach, incomplete sentences that English teachers probably wouldn't like. Equations, on the other hand, are complete sentences. They can be true or false, something like the sky is blue or it's Monday morning. Expressions cannot have an equality or an inequality sign. They just have pluses, minuses, times, divide, exponents, parentheses, all of your basic operations, but no equation or inequality sign, whereas equations do have an equality sign. Inequalities would have an inequality sign like less than or greater than. Expressions can be simplified, they can be expanded, they can be evaluated, and equations can be solved and they can be true or false for different values. So that's kind of the difference between expressions and equations. Here's some definitions that you'll need to know before we move forward. A variable is just a symbol used to represent something we don't know. It's either a letter or it's a Greek letter, or it can be some kind of emoji or symbol or whatever. X, T, and that little symbol there is a theta. That represents things that we don't know yet and we probably want to find out. Factors are any two things that are being multiplied together. So 3 times 4, the 3 and the 4 are factors. In 5 times 9, 5 and 9 are the factors. The product then is the result when those factors are being multiplied. So if I actually multiply 3 by 4, I get 12. And if I multiply 5 by 9, I get 45. An exponent is just the number of times a number is going to be multiplied by itself. That's symbolized by like a little number raised a little bit after a big number that we call a base. So that 7 in 3 to the 7 is called the exponent. The base is that big number that is being multiplied by itself over and over again. And so in that same expression, 3 to the 7, the 3 is considered the base. A term is just a number, a variable, or a product or quotient of numbers and variables. So a bunch of stuff that is being multiplied or divided. So 2x, negative 5, 4a to the third b squared, 5 over x. Those kind of things are called terms. And finally, an expression is just a bunch of those things being added or subtracted. So 2x minus 5 plus 4a to the third b squared minus 5 over x. That would be an expression. Note again, it doesn't have an equal sign, which is why we can call it an expression. So converting verbal phrases to algebraic expressions is a skill that we need to have in Algebra 1. So if something reads 16 times x squared minus 5, I need to be able to convert that to algebraic notation. So I would have to write that as 16x squared minus 5. Similarly, if I was asked for half of y plus 2/3 of z, I'd have to be able to write that as 1/2 y plus 2/3 z. 4 less than the product of 5 and x. Now less than is the one part of English that doesn't read left to right when you translate it to algebra, because 4 less than something doesn't mean 4 minus something, it means something minus 4. So 4 less than the product of 5 and x would be 5x minus 4. So note that less than is that one thing that disobeys the left to right rule. 10 minus the quotient of w and 8 would be 10 minus w over 8. Notice that quotient means divide. 9 more than 1/4 of p is, and again, more than means plus 9, but honestly when you're adding, the order doesn't matter like it does with subtraction. So if you had written 9 plus 1/4 p, that's the same thing. And we'll talk about that later once we start talking about the properties of algebra. Okay, now here's some examples. If cereal sells for X dollars for a small box and Y for a large box, we are to write an expression for the total cost if we buy 12 small boxes and 17 large boxes. Well, 12 small boxes at X dollars per box would be 12x, and 17 large boxes for Y dollars per box would be 17y, so I get 12x plus 17y. If a company earns G cents for every bolt that passes inspection and they lose H cents For every bolt that does not pass inspection, we are to write an expression for the amount earned for 4,000 bolts that pass inspection and 150 bolts that don't pass inspection. So that means I'm going to get G cents for each of those 4,000 bolts, and I'm going to subtract H cents for each of those 150 bolts. So that gives me 4,000 G minus 150 H. And lastly, we have the volume of a sphere that is the product of 4/3 of pi and the cube of the radius. We need to write an expression for that. Product means we multiply, so I'll take 4/3 of pi and multiply that by the cube of the radius, which is 4/3 pi r cubed. So we're going to talk about that more in class. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will see you tomorrow.